Welcome back to Making It Awkward. I'm your host, Jessica Wilson. Today, we're learning about farm subsidies, government and corporate cheese, and also cheese caves. Since we were last here, RFK Jr. was officially confirmed by the Senate, and today, as I'm recording this intro, his signature was on the letter eliminating the jobs of hundreds of public health employees. Who knows what will happen by the time this episode is out, but I'll be sure to continue the conversation. Today is my episode with agricultural teacher Mackenzie Behrle. Folks watching this episode on YouTube or Spotify can see that she arrived ready to talk about cheese. Mackenzie and I talk about farm subsidies and try to make sense of cheese caves. Recently, a student of hers gave a speech about big cheese, so she was exactly who I wanted to talk to. A few things to define before we get started. She mentions the Checkoff program, which is a federal program that requires agricultural producers and handlers to finance federal programs from assessments charged on a per unit basis of their marketed commodity. The money goes to do research and advertise the commodity sold. For example, the Dairy Checkoff goes to fund Dairy Management Incorporated. And according to that organization's website, dairy farmers pay 15 cents and dairy importers pay 7.5 cents for every 100 pounds of milk, or the equivalent thereof, they sell or import into a dairy product promotion fund that is called the Dairy Checkoff. The money overall, with USDA oversight and under the direction of a farmer board of directors, is used to fund programs aimed at promoting dairy consumption and protecting the good image of dairy farmers, dairy products, and the dairy industry. An example of this is the Dairy Council. The Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine reports that DMI has worked with Domino's to add pepperoni-stuffed cheesy bread and other fast food restaurants, including McDonald's, Pizza Hut, and Wendy's, to develop cheesier products. And with that, here's my interview with Mackenzie. Mackenzie, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Before we start with everything, can you be the one to explain the relationships of all the farm ag people that we've had on the show thus far?
Well, I think a lot of it revolves around your wife,
Okay.
First and foremost. So Trampus, Sarah, and I all went to high school together with Alicia, Jessica's wife, and have continued a friendship until now. And also you had Jeff on as a little video clip.
Yeah.
And Jeff is a friend of all of ours, and he was a student teacher of mine about 15 years ago, something like that.
Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah lived on the street from Harmon and Son.
Mm-hmm.
Were you a dairy buyer, cheese?
A dairy buyer
of his? Did your family know about or go to their farm?
No. My family did know about them. We raised like backyard animals. We just had about an acre of land, and so had some animals and things like that. So you're familiar with the bigger farms in the area, but nothing directly like that. I did start going to school with Trampus in middle school. And I remember very specifically that he talked about cows nonstop.
Really?
Nonstop. And I might have been mean to him about it, which I'm really sorry, Trampus. I apologize now because cows are cool. Yes.
Definitely converted many a listener.
Yes. Look at, I even, repping the which I'm going to take off now.
No, you'll have to put it back on for the episode art. Okay. Another question. Well, actually, let's introduce yourself. Yeah, introduce yourself.
So my name is Mackenzie Behrle, and I am an agriculture teacher. I teach agriculture classes in the high school setting, and this is my 25th year doing it.
That's all right. We look great.
Yes, I think so.
You're right. So what classes and what are these things?
Being an agriculture teacher, you can teach a really wide range of classes. I've taught tractor driving and welding and livestock production, greenhouse management. Right now, I mainly teach food and you classes, which is like a hybrid farm to table type of class where the students learn about where their food comes from. And then we go to the kitchen and we prepare food. And I also teach public speaking and leadership.
And FFA, 4-H, you do those things?
I'm not a 4-H leader, but I am an FFA advisor. So FFA, a lot of people know it as Future Farmers of America, and it's an agriculture-based leadership organization that students can be involved in from 7th grade until they're 21. And we do mostly a lot of agriculture-based activities, but they are rooted in leadership. There's a lot of public speaking. I used to coach a lot of debate within FFA. We explore current ag issues, sales, marketing, all that kind of thing.
And you travel, like this is a big deal.
Yeah. We even went, my teaching partner received second in the nation in horse judging with her students. And so we got the opportunity to go to an international livestock show. And so we took students to Ireland and Scotland because of that. So beyond that, we do travel a lot in the US.
Yes. And it's called fair. It's not the fair that you go to.
We do go to fair. Yes. That is true. We don't put a "the" in front of it.
No, but everybody else does. Like, I'm going to go to the fair, the state fair, the county fair. And then, yes, it wasn't until meeting Alicia, like, "the" was gone. And I was like, where did it go? Like, just fair. Okay. So raw milk months ago opened up my ag deep dives, led me to bird flu, obviously Trampas, and I still have unanswered questions about agriculture. Something that has been a through line is subsidies of farmers and all of the terrible things that this causes. So I feel like this will only be like the first of 27 conversations about subsidies. And this one will be fun enough to be about cheese and also have cheese caves. And I feel like we're going to have an additional fun portion to all of these more academic conversations.
Hopefully, right? Ag is fun, but it is complicated too.
To get it started, can you run me through subsidies? Yes.
So farm subsidies are actually pretty complicated. And I'm going to try to give you just my high school teacher rendition of what it is, because I'm not an economist and there's so much that goes into what farm subsidies are. But basically, they first came around, FDR started it during the New Deal. And, after the Great Depression, trying to pull out of the Depression, they started the Agricultural Adjustment Act. And basically that started what we think of as subsidies.
Okay.
And farm subsidies can take a lot of different incantations. That was a weird word to use, but a lot of them are in the form of insurance. They're viewed as kind of crop insurance. So if prices don't maintain the levels that they had during 5 years, farmers have the assurance that they're going to get paid the difference based on like market, it being volatile. And so it helps support and stabilize not only farmers' income, but it supports and stabilizes our inventory of agriculture products. So it allows us to be able to have a stable food supply. It allows us to promote production, especially if we need to produce more of a certain type of crop. Some things take years to plant to production. And so it's a really long-term investment. So they have to have some assurances that there will be money on the other end of it. It also has a large part to play with our export market, since we export a lot of our crops. And then it ensures that we have food during tough economic times, and then also during catastrophic weather events, because farming is so unpredictable with disease and weather and all sorts of things impact farming that you can't quantify. Farm subsidies help have more assurance for farmers.
Does that mean the assurance, like they stay in the game?
Yes. Okay. So a lot of people are moving out of agriculture. I think the average age of farmers is up around 60 years old right now. And so subsidies do help keep people in agriculture because there is assurance that they will get paid. Obviously, it causes some issues because we would want to work in a supply versus demand type of scenario. That would be ideal. But that's hard with farming because some things are more expensive to produce. Some things are more risky to produce. And we still want to have all of those things. We're a pretty spoiled country where we walk into the grocery store and we could literally have anything.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that has to do because of farm subsidies, because they allow supply to maintain, the status quo, and allows us to still have crops and products.
Questions. Which are the riskier or like the more delicate things?
I mean, almost anything is risky. You never know when insects or disease are going to come through. And especially right now, honestly, with global warming, we're seeing a lot of changes within agriculture. Even a 10-degree difference in a field is going to affect growth rates, water availability, all of those types of things. Off the top of my head, I would say fruits and vegetables, just because of how they are a bit more risky.
We'll get into cheese, but like as somebody who was driven through farm country, there are giant grain silos that I think are filled with grains. Who actually knows? They just look like it. Where is the excess like food product stored, located for years?
I don't know where all of it is stored, actually, but you are right. A lot of it is in silos. You can hold grains for a few years and things like that there.
Okay.
We do have excess in the U.S. of most of our staple crops. So corn, wheat, soybeans, cotton, rice, all of those types of things that we would need if there were any issues with weather or financial instability. But cheese, they found something really creative, and they do store a lot of that in cheese caves. It used to be, if you know the term government cheese, the government was the one that was storing it for a long time. But I believe now the majority of the cheese that's stored in caves is corporate cheese.
Corporate cheese.
Corporate cheese.
Okay. We'll get back to that for sure. I am certain that folks listening are to be like, big ag ruined all of us and ruined our health. It's monoculture at its finest. Like if we didn't have big ag, then we would be a healthier country. Any thoughts on that?
Yes. I think there is two ways that I kind of want to go about answering that. The first one is, though I see plenty of problems with subsidies, and I think most of all of our social support programs were designed for good, and then people have found a way to exploit them, or they haven't worked exactly like we expected them to, or we end up with hundreds of thousands of pounds of cheese that we're not using, which, is wasteful. But we need a way to stabilize agriculture. To me, it would be insane if we just were like, let's do supply and demand in ag right now.
Okay.
And it would be devastating to our food supply. And also, some of the subsidies even go to help support environmental efforts on farms.
Yeah.
There are some people really complained a lot about farmers getting paid to not grow crops on their land. But some of that is about rehabilitation and bringing the soil back and helping riparian areas and different things like that. So there is a lot of good that comes from that. It's just kind of hard to understand, you're getting paid not to do something. So it's a little confusing. On the flip side of that, I can definitely see where people think of big ag as the problem. There is definitely a lot of issues with monoculture, which is another problem all in itself. But at the heart of it, it does try to stabilize all production. And it ends up, like everything, corporate farms have more access to lawyers and lobbying ability. And then sometimes they get an inequitable amount of subsidies because of that. The majority of the farms in the US are still family owned. It's somewhere over 90% of farms in the United States are family owned. And some of those are called corporations, and that's for tax purposes. But there is some inequity there. And a lot of it has to do just access to cash and lawyers and to be able to get some of those subsidy funds.
Yeah. Trump was selling to like big distributors of milk when they were still dairy farming. That was surprising to me. Didn't ever think about that.
Especially in the dairy field, a lot of crops we can, take across state lines, and they have a longer shelf life. Most dairy, all the dairy industry is pretty local because of the freshness of the product and all that sort of thing. So dairy is a little bit different versus a lot of other crops because of the freshness of the product. So you're going to see more local dairies everywhere than, cranberries. They only grow in a certain place, but they can be shipped everywhere.
Sure. Since I have you here, this was not going to be the conversation.
I'm like, I really went off on subsidies. So
no, that's a lot of, in my deep dives into Make America Healthy Again and all of the people, right, they're blaming big ag. And then they're saying things like, we have seed oils. We have billions and billions, right, of these seed oils and soybean oils. And they're just like pumping it into our food and our food supply because they have it and the government owns it.
Yeah.
Some partially true, kind of true.
Yeah. And I think that goes hand in hand with talking about the checkoff programs. For instance, when I sold my market steer at Fair, not the Fair, part of my check went towards the beef checkoff system. And it's basically a collective advertisement that benefits all beef producers. Now, I'm not sure if every commodity has it, but I'm pretty sure every commodity has their own checkoff system. And it helps because you're going to have collaborative advertisement for that industry when everybody is individual. And so, for instance, like the Got Milk program comes from checkoff dollars.
Right.
And super successful. And it helped push and it helped sell dairy that we might have had excess for, but it also helped promote small farmers and just dairy consumption as a whole. And that happens within the seed industry and all sorts of commodities because we have that checkoff system that then promotes products.
So dairy specifically, love Got Milk. Like if I'm going back and looking at those photos of the ads, and I'm very sad that I was never when I'm like anyone who was anyone in the 90s and early 2000s who had low-rise jeans, like got an ad, who was an athlete. They're incredibly iconic. The ad campaign is viewed to be so successful, but because of the recognizability of the identification of milk and those ads together, but milk consumption has decreased over decades. So I'm like, did we maybe like curb that decrease with this campaign? Like it didn't increase milk consumption.
I've always found that really puzzling because I love cheese. I love dairy adjacent products, but I'm not a fan of milk. I've never drank milk as like a tall glass of milk. That's, I don't know, kind of weird to me. And I grew up in a family that didn't drink milk. And so it was nothing that I ever did. And in looking at certain things, I even saw, I think she was out of California. There was a high school student that actually sued. Yeah. Did you see that lawsuit? Sued over basically milk being pushed at every school lunch and then also bringing up all the excess that was left over because kids do have to take a carton of milk at every lunch. And I see that at my school. And I think part of her was wanting to talk about racial discrimination and how many different races are more lactose intolerant,
right?
And how there needs to be options besides just milk, which people are allergic to. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I think that was LA Unified School District. And it was like, you can't say something bad about milk.
Yeah, that was part of it too. But because it was freedom of speech. That's a little insane. But I think sorry. Because you should be able to say, I don't like milk.
Right.
But what her point was, especially the waste that we have because it's required, it's crazy. I really have wondered why we have so much, it is a problem. I think at a certain level, even though I was like, farm subsidies, we do need a bit more supply demand type of scenarios within it. I think we just kind of created a monster with some of the situations.
The conversation about school lunches and like putting milk in lunches, I have found to be like a lot of the 90s. In the 90s is when these bad things started happening and they really started pushing milk. I was like, I went to school in the 80s. Like we had shitty lunches and milk, tiny cartons of milk. And they were trying to push these milks onto people. And I'm like, we just didn't drink it. They ended up in the trash. It's not like we were like, this is a part of a balanced lunch. It was like, this is gross and I'm not drinking it. Here it's, in the trash. Chocolate milk, drank more.
Yes, it did. And I think because my mom did work in school
Oh,
cafeterias,
that's right.
and they would order a lot of chocolate milk because the kids would drink it more.
Right.
It was consumed a lot more.
Boring milk. I'm not drinking it.
Yeah, I
It
did
tastes
drink
like a carton. I'm not doing
drink
that.
strawberry milk every now and
Oh, strawberry milk. Oh, so good.
then.
But also so weird. I think
It is weird, but just, to have one every few years.
Yeah, the novelty is more what it was. It's not like anybody was like, it wasn't milk propaganda,
No.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like it was, it's such an interesting framing for me. I've yet to meet one person who was like, yeah, I started drinking milk at school lunches and never stopped because it was amazing. But like, that's the downfall of America. That's why we have heart disease. It's because of, yes, big dairy putting milk in our lunches that nobody drank.
So much of it is what we're raised with. And then also the economic status of our families. I grew up where my mom stayed home and cooked meals until I was in middle school. And so that's what I was raised with, and in the 80s, she made everything from scratch and stuff like that. And that was viewed as, now it's kind of posh to do everything on your own. We were viewed as, having less money because we did that type of stuff because we didn't afford all the pre-made meals and things like that. So it's interesting how those shifts in what we perceive food have changed, but then also it framed how I eat food and what I think of eating food. And then I also found something that, if there was, a dad in the household, how they approached food made a big impact on the children as well. So if you had like a meat and potatoes type of dad, then your scope of foods that you were willing to try was a lot smaller because it just wasn't offered. My father would eat anything. And so because of that, my mom got to cook a larger variety of food. And then I was exposed to more food. And I'm just really surprised how food phobic people are. I talk to my students a lot about different types of food. And I'm always surprised how many haven't tried different things. And some of that is economics. I totally 100% get that. But also it's just what is in their household and, what they're exposed to. When I have foreign exchange students, they've tried a lot more types of food. Yeah. And it's always interesting having them in the conversation in classroom.
With a lot more flavor too.
Not just salt and pepper. No.
Right. That's, maybe some garlic powder. Not just those things. For sure. Food phobia. I love that. And even when like school lunches and milk in school lunches was getting a lot of attention and backlash, like there were still, tens of % of people who were just lactose intolerant and not drinking it at the time. So yeah, the requirement to get it, the obvious outcome of people not drinking it, it's interesting. So what, the milk is just there? Where is the milk coming from? If it's local, like dairies are just like, help me. It goes from cow to like the government and then it goes in our milk. Like, I don't, what's the pipeline?
Cow, government, school. No. There's local processors. So like Harmon & Sons sold to what we would consider large dairies. And then they're the ones that would package and send out the products. There was no like, stop at the White House.
Yeah, right. Doesn't it seem like that?
Yeah, I think you could frame it that way. It has to do more with payments where the government is involved, I would say. Yeah.
So all of these statewide dairies have little cartons of milk. The dairy, the dairies put those and then like ship them into the school district or whatever it is.
Yeah. Okay. So it's all local farms producing to local schools. And even your milk on the shelf, for the most part, you always have your local dairies that are right there to choose from. And those could come from a family farm. Probably most of them are.
I remember that being a bigger deal in Oregon. Probably because it's a smaller state. Like, where is it coming from? Let me pinpoint that dairy versus California.
Yeah. But dairy is huge in California.
Yeah, it is. Anytime you're driving down I-5 or 99, you're passing them and smelling them all the way down. The beauty of the internet is that the Oklahoman has articles from 1987 on its website now, which is phenomenal. They spoke to both beef and dairy farmers during that dairy buyout, 1986 and 1987. And in 87, it was beef farmers who were upset about the buyout program because the cows that were not used for dairy production were moved into the beef market. And so the price of beef fluctuated. And so all of these subsidies that go up and down, or I guess the prices that go up and down, do they truly stabilize the market? I don't know.
I don't know if you can truly stabilize the agriculture market. It's really volatile. There's just so many things that go into it. But yeah, I could imagine that beef producers were upset because all of a sudden there was all this more beef on the market.
Yes. So Trampus was the one that brought to me dairy buyout. And I pitched this to you. Let's start with, was the information new to you or had you heard about it before?
No, I've heard about the dairy buyback program. Maybe in one of my college classes, we probably dove into it because with an ag degree, I took beef production, 400 level classes. So
wow. Okay.
I know. Actually, beef production was one of my favorite classes I took, but dairy buyback program, I know it happened in the 1980s, and then they've had other similar types of programs again in like the early 2000s, and then again during the recession in like 2016, 2017, where they've done different types of buybacks to where they've taken herds out of production in an effort to raise prices, lower cow numbers, and kind of stabilize the market.
And Trampus was saying that just made dairies and farms go out of business, like chosen to or otherwise just go out of business.
A lot of small producers then ended up transferring to something else. And it really only ever was a temporary solution.
It's interesting. The deep dives one could go on into subsidies, bananas. And it's always chalked up to, again, like subsidies are the root of all evil and why we're unhealthy. Cool. End of story. Okay. Cheese and cheese caves. Obsessed, unsure when I heard about them, but 100% was thinking this is a lie. There simply cannot be cheese in caves.
There is, in fact, cheese in caves.
I'm so excited that there are cheese in caves in Missouri. Well, one like cave in Missouri, and then it's like all the articles are like, and then there's some around, other places in the country. I'm like, where are these cheese?
I think there's one in New York. There's several over. They're more. Not on the East Coast, but more eastern side of the U.S. There's a lot more cave systems in that part of the country.
Okay.
And so there's more accessibility to them.
Sure.
I became more familiar with farming in caves. I had a student a long time ago who did a speech on, I believe it was about genetically modified wheat. And she had contacted a farmer in Kentucky or Indiana to get information for her speech. And he invited her to come visit the cave farm. And so I got the opportunity with her and some of my other students to go see them growing this genetically modified wheat inside of a cave. And it was really cool. It was kind of a greenhouse scenario inside the cave, but just like the cheese need a constant temperature and things like that. Crops need specific variables as well. And so they're able to control things a lot more. And then because it was a genetically modified variant, there was not going to be any cross contamination with other fields because it was being grown underground.
Yeah.
So that was really interesting. And it opened my eyes to other possibilities of how we could have agriculture and what people were doing. That's nothing we think about over here on the West Coast. We don't have as much of an extensive cave structure here to be able to do those types of things. But the rest of the cave was full of tires.
Okay.
So we store tires in caves as well because they maintain a certain temperature. And so the tires don't inflate and deflate. They stay there ready for supplies.
Oh, I thought this was just like farmers' old tires.
No, like I can't think of a tire manufacturer right now, but like the big tire manufacturers store their tires in caves.
Like Firestone is like when we rent out this cave.
Yeah, we were driving around and it was like tires, tires, tires. And then we went to the section of the cave that they were growing their wheat in.
Wait, okay. So I am envisioning small cave, but you were driving through this cave?
Yeah. Yes.
How big was the cave?
Huge. It was a very large cave. There is just underground caves.
I'm so confused. I don't know about this at all.
That's why we can store so much cheese in them, because they're very large.
Okay, we're talking about 1.4, I believe, billion pounds of cheese.
I mean, but I'm telling you, there were so many tires. So, I mean, it was like floor to ceiling of the cave tires.
So this cheese, again, to me.
Sorry, we went on tires. We're back to cheese.
No, tires was great. These are things I didn't know. Again, with the dairy. So does my assumption is that this dairy is gathered. It is taken to the White House.
Yes,
then
correctly.
Right. Then processes this cheese and goes and takes it to a cave. Could it be that that's how it happened?
I mean, basically, that is how it happens. So, no.
How would it not happen that way?
There is manufacturers, and then they must have a contract. This is my guess.
Okay.
Is probably part of their production is on contract with the government, because a lot of times there's the futures market that you can buy into with, which is like the stock market for agriculture.
Yeah. Okay.
I told you I'm not an economist, but there is all of this stuff. And so I imagine just part of their contract is with the government. And so whoever processes their milk and makes cheese, then they would sell it to the government. You know, I think they go around the White House.
Okay. Congress is not involved in this, cheese.
And I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there is less government cheese now than like in the 80s, when it was like a real problem where they weren't utilizing it.
Right. And it was going moldy. And that's why Reagan has his iconic picture holding like a brick of cheese. Yes. Yeah. And that's when it went out to like food pantries and other ways for people to get it. But that is my question now. Like, what are we doing with this?
With the cheese?
Yeah.
I know you sent me an article about the cheese, big cheese, partnering with like pizza firms to push out all the pizza to us. And can't we just demonize marketing? Like, they're the problem, not the farmer. It's marketing, you know? I don't know.
The first time I heard about Dairy Management Incorporated was from the speech that your student gave in your class. How did it go?
Yeah. He did a great job. Yeah.
It's both factful and like very cute and funny at the same time.
Thank you.
Yes. It sounds a bit conspiracy-ish.
Yes.
And that's all right. Dairy Management Inc. is like a corporation. And I will say, it's hard to talk about all of these without sounding kind of like a conspiracy theorist, because there is minimal information. There's like the broader aspects of these corporations and these organizations and like very scant details. So Dairy Management Inc. seems to be connected to the government because the USDA regulates its promotion of milk in the domestic market. And that's as much information as we have. But Dairy Management Inc. is what you were discussing about with like the pizza and how we ended up with like cheesy stuffed crust pizza and chalupas that had like a cheesy additional layer. The idea is that we're just, paying companies to put extra cheese in things. And were we giving them money or were we giving them cheese to do this?
I don't know the answer.
No, it's not clear.
Yeah, I know. But it all goes back to that collective advertising. So we're paying these people to push dairy. Yeah. And so they're trying to find, collaborative ways to be able to do it. Mm-hmm. Is it the best thing for us health-wise? Probably not. But marketing, I tell you, marketing is part of the issue here.
Mm-hmm. And if I was eating Domino's regularly enough for that cheese consumption to be high, I think I'd have additional concerns about my health rather than, so like in the big picture, what is happening? People are always giving like these simple solutions. And I'm like, is it? I don't think it is.
Well,
Yes.
it's even the California ad, like Happy Cows Live Here. Do you remember that?
Yes.
That was from the California Dairy Council, I believe, which it's a similar type of program.
Yes.
Do you eat cereal ever?
Oh yeah. Almond milk is my typical go-to.
Yeah, that's true.
What about you?
I don't eat a lot of cereal. Cereal is another thing that has been heavily subsidized because, like dairy, we had a lot of excess grain after World War II. And so why do you think we have so many types of cereal and, all of these cereals out there? And maybe big grain and big dairy were in it together.
To make cereal?
Yes.
Whoa. Okay,
Probably.
Tell me more about cereal and making cereal. Is that why like other countries have porridge and we have like dry cereal?
Maybe. I know that after World War II, we had an excess amount of grain, just like we had an excess amount of dairy and we had an excess amount of a lot of other crops because we had cranked up production for the war. Mm-hmm. And that was also the height of, I dare say, food science, where we were trying to develop new types of products and things like that. Mm-hmm. And that's where we got a lot of our cereals from, is during that time. And then a lot of advertising went into selling cereals and things like that. And that's why I sent you that movie clip, because it had a lot of kind of some conspiracy theory in it about Pop-Tarts. But it was about, these grain industries and all these types of industries and the marketing involved to get people to eat these products. Mm-hmm. And I think there was just like, we had a lot of food. We got to figure out how to push it on consumers. Mm-hmm. And it's just taken off since then. Mm-hmm. And then also, I mentioned just kind of how viewpoints shift and change. And after World War II, if you had a garden or you were doing things like that, that was viewed pretty negatively.
Interesting.
Because if you were more affluent, you were buying, the ready to make meals and things like that. Mm-hmm. And so it was just kind of a shift in consumerism and how it was being viewed and who was solidly middle class. Mm-hmm. They were getting microwave meals instead of getting it from their garden because they could afford it. And so some of this stuff all goes hand in hand together with those things.
Mm-hmm. I remember hearing stories from old people about Tang and how it was like space drink.
Yeah. So, yeah. Marketing, man.
Yeah. With the marketing piece, of course, I have to go back to, and then marketing is blamed solely for the consumption of all of like whatever it is in cereal. And that's why we're unhealthy, because of marketing. And I'm like, things are just way more complex and people are giving us simple solutions and it's not all adding up. And in all of the critiques about cheese and our consumption of cheese and where cheese is finding its way into our fast food, we don't eat the most cheese per capita of the world. Like it is not us. Even with all of this subsidized cheese, there are far more people in European countries. Like we're from the list that I can find, we're not in the top 5. Some we're not in the top 10. It's a lot of European countries. And we're, again, never shitting on them for their wheat consumption. We're never shitting on them for their butter consumption. And we're never shitting on them for the cheese consumption. Mm-hmm. And it's like, what are we really trying to say about Americans? That we're just gross here? Like,
I think everybody is just trying to find an easy solution to the problem. And there is no easy solution. People have access to what food they have access to. And I hate that we shame people for what they have access to. Mm-hmm. Some people only have a choice to eat cheesy bread pizza, that might be the only thing that's accessible to them. And if you look at other countries, yes, they're eating a lot of things similar to what we are, maybe not as processed, but what is that? And they're a lot more active. Their communities are built differently. If we want to start looking at the more complexity of the issue here in the US, probably lack of affordable health care, the fact that we don't walk much, the fact that it's probably a higher stress level here. There's a lot of things that come into play, and it's not just subsidies. It's not just marketing. It's not just cheese.
It's not just seed oil. It's not because we're not using red light therapy.
Yeah.
Everything else that's wild. Interesting. People are so weird.
I did accidentally buy 100 euros worth of cheese on my last trip I took.
Can you walk us through how this happened?
So we were in Vienna, Austria, and visiting the Christmas markets. And we were there 2 years ago, and I remembered this cheese stand. So I was like, oh, excited, because his cheese was really good. And I went up there and I sampled some, and they sell it in like hunks,
Sure.
And he's like, oh, how wide do you want it? And so I was like, oh, this. And I got 2 pieces of cheese.
Okay.
2 pieces of cheese.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was like, it was like 111 euros. And I was like, yes, thank you. Thank you for that. At that point, what are you going to do?
Mm-hmm.
You take your very expensive, very delicious cheese and you go. But it was pretty funny after the fact. I was very bougie in my cheese purchase.
That was the healthier type of cheese.
I guess, there you go. Yeah.
Interesting. Is it your understanding that all of the cheese on these cheese circles in these caves is American cheese? I have not yet found that to be information. Like, what type of cheese is it?
So it sounds like the stuff we think of as government cheese is more like American cheese. It's kind of, I've never had it, but people said it has a really distinct taste.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a cross between like cheddar and Velveeta together.
Yeah.
So I could imagine what that tastes like. But because a lot of big cheese companies are utilizing caves as well, there's a lot of different types of cheeses that I found that almost any type of cheese, they're aging underground.
Wait, say more about that. There's corporations, not just the White House.
It's not just the White House that has these cheese caves. I wish I could remember some of the names of the companies, but it sounds like a lot of our larger cheese distributors are actually using caves as storage as well.
So it's not just the government that owns $1.4 billion. I mean, according to you, it could just be like a small cave of Vienna cheese.
It could be,
One wheel could be 104.
It was like a chunk.
Like 1.4 billion euros worth of cheese would not take, that much for storage. Corporations, not just government, in these caves. Interesting. After I sent you the list of cave information and subsidy information that I hope you were able to help me with, I wrote another email that was like, how did I forget the raw milk of it all and the connection here? And you mentioned you teach classes. I was wondering, similar to what Trampus was seeing, if you've gotten questions about raw milk and either health or just generally.
Well, it's been really interesting because it feels like everything is like a full circle moment right now with raw milk and bird flu and just everything like that. And I happened to be in class, I think 2 weeks ago, and the kids, we were making dog biscuits, and they wanted to like eat the dough.
Sure.
And then that kind of went on to raw cookie dough and us talking about eggs and raw eggs and cookie dough. And then that led to raw milk and then to us talking about bird flu. So it was kind of a big full circle moment in there. And number one, nobody knew about bird flu.
What? Really?
Very troubling. And so we talked a bit about that. And I was like, I would, for the time moving forward, not eat raw cookie dough, let's not be doing that. And also let's not be giving our animals raw products.
Right.
And then one of the kids had heard about some cats dying at a dairy from drinking raw milk.
Yeah.
And then it just like became into a different conversation. And one girl was like, milk is bad. It's just bad. And I was like, okay, explain more. Why is milk bad? And it's just overprocessed. Which led me to think that she was saying raw milk was better. And so I was like, well, what processes are we talking about? And this was not in a structured classroom situation. It was a casual conversation. And then she couldn't answer it. Her only answer was that milk was bad.
Sure.
And I had to explain to her about homogenization and pasteurization and like why we do these things. And her answer right after that, when I talked about those things, was still milk was bad. And then she must have thought about it because I was back at my desk doing something else. And she came over and said, well, is that why people used to heat up water before they drank it? And I could see she made a connection. And I said, yeah, that's exactly why, So, and then she said, and I literally only talked about homogenization and pasteurization. She's like, how do you know so much about milk? And then I was like, it just hit me full force that people are so disconnected from agriculture and really don't even know what I would consider kind of the basics of what it was. Because her mind was kind of blown about what homogenization was.
What is homogenization? You're going to leave us all hanging.
It's when you shake it to disperse the fat particles in there. So, raw milk, it separates out.
Yeah.
But the milk we buy in stores is homogenized. And the fat particles are dispersed within it in the product. And
it's just easy enough to shake it and have that happen?
I mean, I'm sure it's some big time shaking.
I don't know. The mystery. Why we don't know a lot about our food. Okay. Whipped cream. How does that happen?
Most milk is at a higher fat percentage than what we consume it at. So a lot of cows will produce like 5%, 6% fat milk, just straight from the teat. Yeah.
I thought it was, so the 3.3, they like get it down to whatever whole milk. So whole milk is still cut or removed some.
I believe so, yeah.
Fascinating. And then you have your students shake whipping or like.
Oh, we make butter sometimes.
Yes. How do you make butter?
I get a high quality whipping cream. A lot of times I'll buy it at Costco. They have a higher fat percentage one. And then we just put it in a mason jar and I make them just, shake it up. And then have you made butter? Yes.
No.
Oh, it's so easy. So you shake it and then it turns to whipped cream basically.
Okay.
And so you could use it as whipped cream and then you shake it past that stage and then it starts to separate.
Yeah.
And it actually starts to yellow a bit more like butter is.
Interesting.
And then you pour out all the milk fats or the buttermilk and then you're left with butter.
Wait, so pour off what? Okay. Clearly, nope. I have to do this. This is what needs to happen.
Oh yeah, it's really easy to make. So you get it, pour a little bit. Like I would just if your mason jar was this big, I'd just pour a little bit at the bottom.
Okay.
Because you don't want to make my mom makes butter in the food processor. She says that's a lot easier. But
what? The same way?
She just puts it in the food processor and makes it like that. But I like to have the students labor more by doing the shaking. So
a little bit in there, a shake for days.
You just shake it turns to whipped cream, and then you shake it past that, and you start getting the solids, which is the butter, and then the liquid, which is buttermilk. And you could save the buttermilk to use for other things, or just throw it away because buttermilk is gross. But
I was going to say, why is it so sour? Did all of the sweetness end up in the butter?
Yeah, I guess so. Magic. And then you can run it under cold water or put it with ice because you want to get as much of the liquid out of it as you can because the more liquid that stays in there, it goes rancid faster because there's no preservatives in that butter.
Oh, right.
And then you can flavor it, put a little salt in it, or make it garlic butter, whatever you want to. It's really easy.
Okay, so when we are in Southern Oregon to visit Trampus's farm, you will direct Sarah and me and my dad, or at least me and my dad, on how to make butter. We
can make some right there.
Yeah,
we can have a cow behind us, and we'll be making butter.
Yes, and then I'll fit a cow in my pocket and bring it back.
Yes, a little calf.
That's my plan. My dogs and the cow are same size, right?
Pretty much. Trampus does have some miniature cows, so.
All right.
Yeah.
Anything else that I have not asked you about? This is going to branch into like 10 different episodes, I feel.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, it's good.
I don't know. I think it might be worth mentioning that other countries have farm subsidies as well.
Okay.
I think a lot of times we try to demonize American agriculture. We are very productive. You know, America is kind of an agriculture powerhouse in terms of like export and production. And other countries, the European Union, Japan, China, they all have some type of farm subsidies. I was even seeing like India has farm subsidies where they give farmers fertilizer and irrigation and stabilized payments and things like that as well. So it is a pretty common practice, probably because it is hard to have a pure supply and demand system with agriculture goods.
Mm-hmm. That's helpful. Because indeed, yes, we're always compared to other countries. In other countries, yes. At RFK's first Senate hearing with the Finance Committee, there was a Montana senator there towards the end who said, you know, are you going to listen to farmers, basically? And RFK Jr. went on and on about how we can't sell to European countries, can't sell wheat over there because their standards are just higher, and you know our wheat's gross and da 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 da, and just went on and on about how everything here is gross. So we want to talk to the farmers about making them better. And that senator was like, no, our, farms are selling to European countries, but this was a Republican senator. So he was trying to give.
Was he trying to help him? Like,
yeah. Or be like, but that's, the people I represent, you just shat all over them. But, I'm still going to support you and vote for you. I'm like, these are not the constituents that you're representing. What is happening here?
I saw the best thing, and it's farm adjacent. I saw an ad, and I think it was like a MAGA thing. And it was basically like talking about if we are getting rid of all of our farm labor and pushing them out of the country, then MAGA needs to step up to go work on the farm. And it was like a very pro-America ad, mocking them because we know we're not going to see Elon out there, picking turnips. So we have to consider the farmers, they're.
Yeah. Farmers feed America. That's some bumper stickers up and down. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a bumper sticker that's true.
Yeah. Unsure if it wasn't farmers who it would be. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mackenzie, thank you for joining me on the show.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.
Yeah. I look forward to our butter-filled futures.
Yes, we will be shaking it up with Wilson.
Thanks so much to Mackenzie for coming on the show. I hope to have future conversations about export food aid and its benefits and drawbacks. Unfortunately, I think it might be tricky to get folks to talk about international food aid right now, so we'll be relying on what's already documented. Next week, we'll include the conversations and highlights from my recent trip to Southern Oregon to visit Trampus's farm with Dr. Sarah Doherty and Mackenzie. I got to talk with a few folks about their thoughts on farming and RFK Jr., and I look forward to sharing those conversations. I also had one about raw milk panic, and it might be one that you don't expect. Until next time, friends, make it awkward. You can buy awkward merch on my website and join the Patreon to make this podcast sustainable. You can leave a comment or review for my dad to read on the episodes. And Dad says,
please rate, review, follow, and subscribe.
This episode is edited by Jen Jacobs, who is subsidized by Patreon members. And the podcast is supported by the Legacy of Sacramento Outboard Services.